Hello. In this video we're going to look at the results of growing peppers in 4 different containers. And each container had a different type of soil mix. So I want to go through each one of these, and because they actually got very different results of growth and harvest from each one. And so I want to go through each one separately and see what we can learn about it. Now, one thing about where these grow is that this is a very it's a hot environment here, about 90 degrees average temperature on the deck here, and it only gets 4 hours of afternoon sun every day. But you can see, even with just 4 hours of afternoon sun, you can get a pretty good harvest of a plant. It is extra challenging though, because you need to make sure that the plants don't wilt too much in the heat, because they only get sunlight in the afternoon, and if they're wilting all the time in the afternoon, they won't grow well. And so that's an extra challenge that would be different than a normal growing environment, and which does make a difference on the type of soil you're going to use. But anyway, so with that said, let's go through each one of these one by one. Okay, let's take a quick look at the harvest from each of these 4, and we'll start over here. Now this one, as I said, this one had a foot of leaves with 6 inches of compost on top, and it had only 2 pepper plants in it, but it did actually exceedingly well compared to my expectations. Especially this pepper plant, which I think is a great stuff hybrid, but I'm not sure. Okay, this is the one that had half compost and half leaves, and it did, reasonably well. Okay, and this is the one that did the best. It, it had compost mixed with leaves, but also a lot of branches mixed in, and it got a nice harvest from this one. And this was the one, it had half bark vines and half turfus, highly aerated soil that didn't do so well. I think the plants were obviously stressed and started to fruit very early. Okay, for the first root excavation, I'm going to do the most interesting one. This is the pepper plants that were grown in 6 inches of compost and then 1 foot of leaves. Okay, I've rolled the plant out of the container now, and just a couple of quick observations after looking at it. So there's a lot of nice roots, a lot of nice white roots, showing there's lots of aeration in this. And I noticed in about the first 4 inches of this mix, it's very dry. It's almost totally dry here. It wasn't watered today or yesterday. But then as you go deeper and deeper into it, by the bottom, and actually the leaves here, a lot of pine needles here, it's actually quite wet and very damp. And some of the dirt, as I suspected would, has, through the watering, has filtered into the bottom foot layer where originally there was only leaves. So now it's leaves and a little bit of dirt. Now another interesting thing is that the bottom of the plant is the roots are all very white here. And I saw this in the eggplants too. And so what this says is that, the bottom, of course the bottom of the container has holes in it, drainage holes, and I guess a lot of oxygen gets in there, so that's good for the roots. Now I think this is, I have to make an improvement next year, I'm thinking, because I have a bucket inside a bucket which would limit the airflow and the oxygen. I think I'll just put these buckets on regular saucers and also lift them up, like I was doing before, on bricks or boards, so there can be a really good airflow underneath, and maybe this can improve this and these can get even more oxygen in the future. And I'll also drill some more aeration, I guess drainage, or actually really aeration holes in the bottom of the bucket for the future. Okay, here's the last look at the pot that was grown in leaves and 6 inches of soil on top. After I kind of looked at this, was the one of the pepper plants. Looks like very nice roots, and they were really white. They've started to gray now since it's been out in the air for a while, or dry. This was one of the basil plants. I had tried planting it in a little plastic pot to see if that would get rid of transplant shock and wilt. It didn't, so not a recommended practice. And the other pepper plant. And one interesting thing that I noticed is that I did plant these, originally it was in oak leaves, long needle pine, and redwood needles. And they've all decomposed quite a lot, because there's some talk that oak leaves don't decompose well, but all these ones really did kind of decompose quite readily. And here's an oak leaf that I tried soaking for a while, a fresh one, just to kind of show the difference in how much these are really decayed. So the oak leaves all decayed well, and so did all the pine needles. So overall, this was actually a surprising success for me. The one pepper plant did really well, one pepper plant did okay, and the basil plant in this did okay, although not as good as previous years where I planted basil and just compost and leaves did better than this. But still, we got more basil than we could eat. Okay, next we're going to look at the one that was planted in half bark vines and half turfus. So these were purchased materials, not from the yard. And this plant produced the least. And let's take a look at the bottom of it. And you can see, actually not too many roots. Just one root got out, but that was it. Okay. So let's see what this one looks like inside. Okay, here I've rolled it around a little bit on its side. And just a quick update is the soil is, after about an inch deep, it's a little damp, but not very wet, but damp. And I did have this pot in here, clay pot, which had a bottom on it. I was kind of experiment to see if I could use it as a water reservoir, because I know this stuff from previous experience wilts a lot. So I kept this kind of full of water in hopes that it would help give it water and so it wouldn't wilt. But it really didn't seem to make too much of a difference. Okay, so this is it's done in half bark, half turfus, and it didn't have enough root mass to actually make a ball, so I couldn't just dump it out. So it just kind of fell out. These are the roots from the 3 pepper plants in this one, and I guess the surprising thing is just how little the root mass was. The roots didn't really grow well into this stuff, and I'm really not sure why. I did fertilize it with chemical fertilizer, something called Foliage Pro. The leaves were all dark green, so I thought it was getting enough, but yeah, it really didn't form a lot of root mass. So, and it is wet. When you get to the bottom, it gets wetter, like the leaf one did. Maybe not quite as wet as the leaf one, but and it was damp at the top, but not wet. So that's this one. Okay, so third, we're going to do the pot that was, the mix was compost mixed with leaves with a lot of branches in it. And this is the one that did the best, so it'll be interesting to see what these ones look like. Okay, with the mulch removed now, I see the top of the soil, just using a finger test, is moist but not wet, but not dry. So just, yeah. Okay, this one I was able to roll out of the container, and the thing that I notice most readily is that this thing is sopping wet at the bottom. I mean, clearly overwatered here. You can squeeze this and just see the water drip out here. So yeah, this is just muck, and there is not a whole lot of probably just too wet for the roots at the bottom, but there are some white roots here at the bottom. But this is the one that did the best. So this is okay. So here's the branch pot now, as it's been totally looked at, and here are the 3 roots for it. Look reasonably well. And as mentioned before, is in this pot, that I had branches and compost and a little bit of leaves, but not too many, mixed in. The bottom was totally wet, the most wet of any of the ones. The middle is actually okay. It's damp, dry, but it's not dry, but it's fine. And the top of the pot, it was moist, not dry, but probably ideally it'd be a little bit wetter. And in this we had lots of branches, and as I've seen other places, a lot of the roots would grow in between the bark and the branch, kind of that little, usually I guess there are little air cavities there, and there's a branch, and a lot of these were rotted ones, and so they did store a lot of water in them. And I was really surprised by just how wet it was at the bottom. I think a lot of water was being stored in a lot of the branches here that otherwise would have just drained out. So, but this is the one that did the best, though, even given how wet it was at the bottom. Is that I noticed the branches that were at the bottom of the pot, where it was real wet, and didn't have as many roots growing into them, which I guess makes sense because it was too saturated. Whereas the branches, especially the real spongy ones, the rotted ones, had more roots that were at the top of the pot where the soil was drier. And so this is Now this is significant and could probably be used when designing a pot in the future. This is the one that used half compost and roughly half leaves that were planted in. This was kind of the standard one. It was the best method that I had used up to this year. Clearly it's been surpassed, but okay, here it is with the mulch removed. And this one, the soil actually collapsed the most in. You can see how, it used to be way up here. Now it's gone way down to here. And I did try to have one of these kind of water reservoir things in here to help out smooth the watering, but it didn't really seem to do all that much. Okay, so here it is. I've rolled it out of the pot, and I do remember now, actually I did put about 4 inches of leaves at the bottom of this pot for aeration, which I hadn't done in the past before. And you see a lot of good white roots at the bottom here, like we saw in the leaf pot. And just go around here, take a look at all the roots on the side, and a fair amount of good roots on the side. Roots on the side where there was soil, but no roots on the side at the bottom of the pot where there are leaves, so that's kind of interesting. And let's see, the bottom leaves are wet. The top half, which is probably, I don't know, maybe 8 inches, it's totally dry. Well, not totally dry, but the soil is really dry, and it's dry right up to the interface, or right up to the point where the soil meets the leaves. The leaves are wet right here, but right here they're dry. So this is actually an interesting finding that I can use probably to design future pots better. Okay, another interesting observation I just found out is that I put a lot of redwood needles in here because I have a big redwood tree here, and one of the things the redwood tree always drops are these little I guess you could call them pine cones, but I don't know what you really call them. And I've also wondered about these, if these would be just little great, like little aeration chambers for roots, meaning once the soil gets around them, there'd still be little air pockets. And I just found out, as I was carefully going through this here, is that it's indeed what has happened. Like here's one of them that was in the soil, and you can see a lot of roots here. So yeah, the roots really do like to attach themselves into the little air pockets, probably, of these tiny redwood cones. And what's interesting is the roots are damp. The roots are, still kind of damp, but the soil that they were in is really dryish, really kind of dryish. So I think that it was just wicking up, the roots that were getting into the pine needle layer below, which is wet. It was wicking water up and keeping the roots damper than the surrounding soil was. Here's a final look at all the roots of the pepper plants along with the harvest of each one, just to get a last final visual comparison of what happened. So over here, this was only 2 pepper plants, but this is when the leaf pot had mostly leaves in it. The roots did very well, actually had the longest roots. And this next one had compost and leaves in the top half, and about 4 inches of, I found out, redwood leaves at the bottom that the roots didn't grow into. And the soil was very dry here. But we got a very good harvest. But I would say the leaf pot probably got a better harvest because it was only 2 plants. So and the pot that seemed to do the best is this one, which was actually the wettest soil. It had mostly compost and just branches in it, and very wet. And those are its roots. And then we had some, it was basically some mix that was based on store-bought stuff, turfus and pine bark, and it did very poorly. And there was a big difference in the soil moisture levels between the top and the bottom of all the pots. And it seems that really the spongy or the rotted wood, when there's rotted wood in the soil, it really makes the surrounding soil keep it wet. And so one of the things that just really jumps out is I'm going to try in the next season is I'll put some rotted wood at the top of the pots, but not at the bottom of the pots. So that way maybe it'll help keep the top of the pots wet, but then the bottoms can stay a little bit drier to more even out the moisture between the top and the bottom. So that's the end of the pepper excavation, and I'll have to think more about what other things I could learn and use from this.